Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Cars, written by Niedski. And that concludes my presentation to the assembly on planet HQZ5, and why I feel the inhabitants would be an excellent addition to our Empire's culture.
Thank you, Minister Orton.
Are there any questions? Orton asked, ignoring the obvious dismissal. The chairman looked shaken by something, and Orton wondered if the presentation had been that bad.
Minister Orton, your allotted time is up,
the chairman began.
Could you explain to us their mode of transportation?
The chairman sighed, and the room grew hushed as all eyes fell on Orton. The cars? Orton asked. I don't really understand what's so interesting.
Please, the chairman rubbed his head. Answer the question so we can move on.
Okay, Orton nodded. Cars are the native species' main mode of transportation. They are essentially crafted pieces of metal and other composite materials that move along the ground on wheels under their own force.
So they are attached to the ground, and the wheels serve as a buffer between the terrain and the passenger cabin?
No, Orton said. They move along the ground on the wheels. The wheels spin and essentially pull the car forward or push it, depending on the type of car.
So they move freely?
Correct, Orton nodded. They do not move on rails, but can move in any direction the operator decides to move them.
Surely such a design could not work on any planet with terrain as varied as HQZ5's.
Actually, you're correct in that thought, Wilson agreed. They create flat roadways that wind through, over, and sometimes even under the planet's terrain so that the cars have a flat surface to drive on.
Even then,
the chairman spoke, his interest seemingly piqued.
Such speeds to make these things convenient would be dangerous to obtain.
Revelation hit Orson like a sack of bricks. He realized that the assembly perfectly understood what cars were, and how the inhabitants of HQZ5 operated them. They just refused to believe. To them, it seemed like insanity. The speed they move is equivalent to the speed most of our rail transportation moves at. Another round of silence fell across the floor as the assembly seemed to be attempting to wrap their minds around this.
No, one of the ministers spoke. I refuse to believe any sane, intelligent species with even the slightest amount of self-preservation instinct would willingly use such modes. Surely they are used boldly by the rejects of society or as a form of punishment. Being forced to transport yourself to your everyday activities in these things is likely the ultimate form of disgrace.
That is objectively wrong, Minister. Orton did not like it when others presumed to know more than him on any of his multiple areas of expertise. The cars are primarily found in larger numbers in the most wealthy areas of the planet. There is an entire subculture built around these things, dedicated to owning loud ones, fast ones, and aesthetically pleasing ones. It is considered a rite of passage when a young member of the native species acquires their first car. While not owning one isn't exactly shameful, it is considered a sign of wealth, or at least moderate prosperity, to have one.
How are these cars energized? I cannot think of any feasible or efficient form of energy that could power such things. Rails is the most efficient form of transportation, moving as many passengers as possible with its fuel. The cars sound like they would use the same amount of electricity as a train to move less passengers.
Yes, another minister concurred. And if the cars move freely, they cannot possibly be on the power grid. Not even we have batteries that can independently power rail travel. They use a liquid called gasoline, Orton sighed. Knowing this would only lead to more disbelief. It is derived from another liquid they call oil, which is formed when the organic matter of an ancient life form is subjugated to heat and pressure over millions of years under the planet's surface. They drill for the substances, derive gasoline from it, and use it as a fuel for the car's combustion engine.
Did you say combustion engine?
Oh, yes, Orton sighed. The engine is powered by the gasoline being ignited, causing a miniature explosion in the engine, which then rapidly moves a set of pistons, which creates the energy to power the vehicle forward.
One of the ministers, a former scientist, stood up with abject anger on his face. Take out such fools, he cried out. I know the substance you're talking about. We have untold amounts of it below the crust of this very planet. Before I entered politics, I worked at a lab that studied the substance. The amount of energy stored in this material, billions of years of sunlight, is essentially compacted into physical matter, is enormous. I cannot and will not believe that the species uses these energies to control explosions to power their modes of transportations. Next, you'll tell us that they also have machines that can fly through the air like a chinyips in our skies. First, they do have flying machines, and the design is fairly simple to emulate. The assembly hall filled with exasperated groans. Second, Orton yelled over the groans, everything I speak right now is the truth. As a scientist, you must know the dangers of speaking as if you are an expert outside of your area of expertise. I suggest you sit down, Minister. The scientist looked as if he had been struck, and his face reddened. But he did not mutter a single word and instead stormed out of the assembly hall. Are these cars dangerous, then? The chairman asked, seemingly coming around to accept the idea of them. I cannot think of any way they would use them under any circumstances. If there were not some form of technology we do not know about that makes these vehicles safe. No, Orton said. They have entire industries dedicated to making them safer. But wrecks involving cars are still one of the leading causes of death. Of course, a huge set of the population drives their cars whilst distracted, operating their mobile computers or engaging in conversation while driving. Then they must not have discovered rail yet. That is the only explanation for their poor choices. One of the more concerned-looking ministers called out, I agree with we should add HQZ5 to our empire, so that we can show them the error of their ways. They do have rail, Orton corrected. Before cars, it was their main mode of transportation, but once they invented cars, they stopped using rail mainly as transportation. An uproar of cries simultaneously rose up through the assembly hall, and the chairman slammed his gavel down repeatedly as he called for order. Minutes passed as ministers cried out at the stupidity and single-mindedness of the mode of transportation, while others called Orton a liar, creating tall tales for his own amusement. You're telling me, one large minister's deep voice boomed out over the commotion towards Orton, but they drive massive blocks of metal, unsecured to anything, fueled by explosions at high speeds on wheels along their planet's terrain, all the while only half paying attention because they are distracted by other things. You want me to believe that they are completely aware of the dangers, know that it increases their chances of death significantly, and even with the option of rail travel, they still willingly use these cars? Yes, Orton said, his voice small as he heard it explained in that fashion. He suddenly felt a lot less willingness to defend these people's choice of transportation. What do they do with their rail infrastructure? Another minister asked. Do they let it rot and rust away? Did they recycle materials for something else? No, Orton shook his head. Their rail lines are now primarily used to transport freight. Another uproar filled the chamber just as the previous one died down. Some ministers were calling for war against the scavengers. Others were calling Orton a liar. A few were crying out that maybe there was something to learn from these people. And most didn't know what to think. Orton glanced up at the chairman, who was banging his gavel furiously to no avail. Its rapid banging drowned out in the commotion. Okay, Orton thought, as he looked into the hysteria around him. I shall not tell them about motorcycles. Story number 2. This is Complete Nonsense, written by Vass_. Dave sees Zellabamad at the library. His tentacles whip around at the keyboard as he types on a computer. Hi, Zellabamad. How are you doing? Hello, Dave. I'm studying human behavior on the internet. Ah, what are you doing there? Writing. I've discovered this interesting discussion board. Really? What is it about? I cannot even begin to describe it.
They discuss many topics here, although I struggle to understand much of it. I am not well versed yet in the language of memes.
Right, yeah, though those can be tricky.
Indeed. It seems utterly nonsensical. How can an image of a man's face somehow translate into a statement to point out the availability of space? In any case, it's interesting how much people put effort into all these trivial things you see here.
Yeah, it's all good fun. No different from what we're doing now, is it? Having a conversation.
Zelabamad turns to continue typing. Yes, I suppose. This kind of virtual medium does open up new avenues for communicating ideas.
Yep, that it certainly does. Anyway, what are you typing there? Having an argument with someone, are you?
Oh, certainly not. You see, you can get points for writing things that others deem informative or entertaining.
Oh, that's quite common, yeah?
Indeed, and it's a good way to study humans. I'm trying to learn just what kind of things people find interesting.
Oh, I see. What are you writing about?
Dave leans in to look at the screen. I'm typing in this conversation we're having.
That's not very interesting at all.
You are correct. This is quite boring and uneventful. There's no compelling storyline, interesting twists or anything, but they will still take time to read the whole thing.
Really?
Yes. They will give me points to do nothing, and I'll feel satisfaction for having these points.
Man, you make it all sound so weird.
No, Dave, I don't. Look now, I'll even clearly state right now in the subject that this is in fact a complete nonsense, and still they will take their time to read it. I don't make you humans sound weird. You are weird.
End of story.
Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Bushmaster 177, Henry the Red, Caspar Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon WRE, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.